Welcome back to Cooking from Scratch. It's Melissa, and today we are talking about two of my most favorite things, cooking and gaming. If you're like me and you go absolutely crazy whenever a game actually includes cooking, I thought I'd give you guys some of my top 5 games that actually do cooking pretty well. Plus, we're going to be doing an amazing recipe from one of them and giving it our own little twist. So, grab yourself a drink, crank up that music, and let's get baking. When it comes to cooking, here are my top 5 games that I think make cooking actually fun within the game. Number 5, Aeon. Aeon is a beautiful MMO that I think came out of Korea. Unfortunately, it came out about the time that MMOs started flipping over from paid services to free-to-play services, and it got on that train a little bit late. So it didn't quite get a really good following at first, but once it got onto the free-to-play model, it really took off. And one of my most favorite things to do in that game is, well, cook. But I mean, come on, how can you resist a cooking table that dances? I wish mine would do that in a non-paranormal activity kind of way. Number 4, Legend of Zelda. Oh, the new one is so beautiful. And I love that they were able to really incorporate cooking in a way that feels natural with the game. You're out and about, you're exploring. It makes sense that you pick up ingredients along the way. And it's so much fun to put them together, throw them in the pot. Do not do that unless you want to get burned. There are people on YouTube who have done this, and create new recipes. Number 3 is actually Kingdom Hearts 3. While I absolutely love this part of the game, probably more than other parts of the game, I feel that one game did it a little bit better. Guild Wars 2. Not exactly a game you would think when it comes to cooking, but part of the fun of that was that you were able to bring ingredients together that you didn't know if it was going to make a recipe or not. And then finally, my number 1, of course, The Sims. Not only do you actually get to train as a chef and go up the chain of the career, but you also get to build and run your own restaurant. One of my favorite things out of there is, of course, the cupcake machine. It spits out cupcakes that I don't have to get dirty to make. And one of them on there, level 8, is the bacon cupcake. The same way that caramel gets its love by mixing salt and sweet, we're gonna do the same thing with bacon. So a little bit of salt, tiny bit of savory, and a little bit of sweet. But to really make it extra, we're gonna take these bacon cupcakes and we're going to make them bourbon bacon cupcakes. So what you're gonna need for this is so first thing that we need to suss out first is the bacon. So here is my most favorite trick for dealing with bacon. Yes, you could always fry this on the stove, and you could also take a bath in hot lava, but why would you? Best trick ever to deal with bacon is let the oven deal with it. In a cookie sheet, we've got lined with aluminum foil, 1 to keep things clean, and 2 because I freaking hate cleaning. We're gonna spray this down with a little bit of cooking spray, grab our bacon. Now the thicker the bacon you can get, the better, no pun intended. So we are going to take this beautiful bacon and lay it down on this sheet. I like to go in a diagonal. That way it minimizes the amount of bacon that's gonna fall through and touch the bottom of the pan, which will keep this bacon about as flat as we can make it. Now, of course, the more meat you can get versus fat is going to help you out on this recipe, but the sad thing is when you get bacon and it's pre-packaged, you wind up getting more fat than you think. That clever little flap that they put on the front so you think you're getting a lot of meat, that's hiding the fat. So my best recommendation, always, if you can do it, get the bacon at the deli counter. Not only because you tend to get more meat to fat ratio, but also because a lot of the bacon that you find that's prepackaged is also swimming in salt water. 1, if you are sensitive to salts, one thing you're gonna wanna look out for. 2, and this is the biggest thing for me specifically, is that all that water content is gonna prevent this from crisping up nicely. Okay, so we're gonna take our lovely, lovely pan of bacon and we're gonna stick it into a 400-degree oven for about 15 to 20 minutes. Now keep an eye on it. Depending on the thickness, your bacon may take a little bit longer to cook or may not take as long to cook. You're gonna want this to where it's a little bit crispy, but still fairly pliable. Because remember, this is gonna be going inside of the cupcake. So it's gonna drink up a little bit of that moisture, but basically we don't wanna feel like we're eating hard rock candy inside of a cupcake. So I will admit, one of the things I hate most about baking is that it does require a fair amount of forethought. Most specifically, you gotta have the craving at least 2 or 3 hours in advance of when you actually want cupcakes, or your butter will not be warm enough to actually work with you. However, I have a secret for you guys. If you've got that sudden craving for cupcakes and don't feel like waiting 3 hours for butter to soften, here's a trick. Don't take these out to soften. Actually stick them in the freezer for about 5 minutes. We're actually gonna want these super, super cold, which I know defies logic, but stick with me. Grab yourself a nice grater. Now, super chilling them is gonna help the butter to be able to grate better. If these were somewhere in between thawing, it would be an utter mess and would actually work against you. So we're just gonna take the butter, take our grater, and slide on down. This works for cupcakes, this works for crust, for pies, this works for cakes. Basically anything where you need butter and sugar to do all the leavening. Okay, now that the butter is taken care of, we're gonna add in our sugar and then introduce this to the stand mixer for about 5 minutes until it's light and fluffy and everything that's wonderful about the combination of butter and sugar. And I know, KitchenAid stand mixers are so expensive. And one of the benefits to getting married and having a wedding registry, yeah, I wanted one of those. But do not worry, if you don't have them, your basic $20, $25 hand mixer will still do the same thing. It just requires a little bit of extra work. So once your butter and sugar basically have the consistency of wet sand, we're able to add in the rest of the wet ingredients. So we're gonna start off with 1/3 cup of milk. And to that, we're gonna add 1/3 cup of our bourbon. Now really, you can use any kind of bourbon or whiskey that you like. And if you're underage, don't worry. A lot of this is gonna get cooked out in the baking process. So really, there's not gonna be any alcohol content to speak of. But if you are concerned, there are extracts that are available of both bourbon and whiskey. So you get the flavor, just none of the alcohol. So when it comes to types of bourbon or whiskey, my go-to really is Bullet bourbon. Not what I would call a great sipping bourbon. I find it to be a little on the sweet side for me, but for the application of cupcakes, perfect. And then a good dollop of vanilla extract. And then crack in your eggs. No matter what Kingdom Hearts tells you, cracking eggs is not as nerve-wracking as undoing a bomb, even though in the game it feels like it. We're gonna add this to our butter, put it back under the stand mixer till it's all nice and integrated. So we actually don't want to completely mix all of the butter into the liquids. We basically just want to bring it together enough that when we introduce the flour is gonna help bring the two parties together. Now, slowly add your flour, unless you like your kitchen to look like it's a white Christmas, just until everything is a nice smooth consistency. You don't want to overbeat this, because overbeaten flour tastes like rubber. Okay, our bacon has now come out of the oven. It's a little curlier than I normally would like, but then again, the bacon that I was working with did have a pretty high amount of fat on it. So the fat is going to get it to curl, sadly. But you know what? We can work with this. So I pulled this out a little underdone because bacon is going to dry out a little bit as it sits and cools. Now, if you want, you can also pull off the fattier pieces and just save the meat pieces, because the meat pieces are really what we want. Then start chopping up our bacon. Okay, once we have our bacon pieces, we're gonna put this into the batter, and then we're gonna scoop it into our little cupcake holders and pop it into the oven. Okay, we are nearly at the finale, so all we need to do now is take care of the frosting. So because the cupcakes themselves are pretty rich on the batter, I decided to go a little bit lighter on the frosting itself. So this frosting is not your traditional frosting, which can normally be kind of thick and really competes with the cupcake in terms of flavor dominance. I'm one of those people who I like the frosting to complement the cupcake, but not be the damn star of the show. Such a little diva, the frosting. So for this one, what I'm doing is actually I'm using a cream cheese, whipped cream, kind of a mix of a frosting. So we're gonna add in 8 ounces of cream cheese to our bowl. If you can, stick your bowl in the freezer for about 5 minutes before you start, because you're gonna want this to be pretty cold. Now it is okay if your cream cheese is not room temperature. You can actually use this straight out of the fridge. Okay, we're gonna stick that underneath the stand mixer just until the cream cheese is a consistency that I like to call whipped into submission. Yeah, something like that. All right, so we're gonna clean down the sides. And then we're gonna switch our attachment to this little guy. Now we're going to slowly add in the heavy cream and keep this whipping until we can start to see some peaks forming. Now you don't want to over whip this. Here's the tricky part. I can't quite tell you when it's done. You basically want to beat this to the point where it's soft peaks but not hard peaks. So basically if you take the whisk out and it pops up like this, and then it sinks over like that, yeah, you get the joke. That's when you're about done. If they stay up like that for too long, you might have beat in too much air. Once it's about this consistency, we're gonna wanna add in the powdered sugar just till it's combined, and then get it off and get it into a piping bag. Okay, we're gonna do one last wipe down of our frosting. Make sure we have all of that powdered sugar incorporated, and then take your piping bag and stick it in the tallest glass that you've got, and we're going to start filling it up with the frosting. Now we're going to take one of our little beauties and just go nuts. Doesn't matter what formation you want to do this in. The important thing is that you just get frosting on the cupcake. Now, if your bacon didn't want to actually shave down into fine bits, that's fine. You can always just add a little sprinkling of sea salt, or if you have it, smoked salt. But instead, we're just going to take some of this nice, fine, gold glitter sugar, add that on top. And then top with a little bit of bacon. And there you have it, our bourbon bacon cupcakes. A little bit of sweet, a little bit of salty, a little bit of spice, a little bit of savory. It's everything you could possibly want in a cupcake. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you know someone else who might enjoy a little twist on a pretty interesting cupcake, if you want to hit the share button down below and send it to them. And if you have a favorite game that includes cooking, or if you happen to be one who has one of those cookbooks from one of your favorite games, let me know what recipe you'd like to see done on the show down below. Thanks, awesome people, and I will see you in the next video. Cheers!